This is a nice piece by the Center for Global Research up in Quebec, Canada. I like to use their information because it's usually very thorough, and when you go back and do your follow-up, it's usually pretty easy to back up what they're what they're saying and to cross-reference it and to be able to look at other people and other media and try to discern what is actually going on in the situation in the Ukraine. Dmitry Yarosh is the leader of the Made in Brown shirts. Under the new government, Yarosh is the leader of the neo-Nazi right sector delegation to the Ukrainian parliament. His close friend and political partner, Andrei Petrubi, co-founder of the neo-Nazi Social National Party of Ukraine, subsequently renamed the Slobodda, was appointed by the new government to the position of Secretary of the National Security and National Defense Committee, the RNBOU, a key position which oversees the Ministry of Defense, the Armed Forces, law enforcement, national security, and intelligence. Right sector leaders, Yarzov was appointed to the number 2 position at the RNBOU. Have the neo-Nazis cornered Ukraine's national security agenda? That's the question. Welcome to the new normal. The Anti-Defamation League, which has expressed its concern about the Slobodda Party, has yet to condemn the United States and Europe's support for it. In a statement published February 28th, the ADL's National Director, Abraham H. Foxman, writes, "The Ukrainian Jewish community is nervous. The ultra-nationalist Slobodda Party, with its history of antisemitism and platform of ethnic nationalism, won more than 10% of the vote in October 2012, shared the political leadership of the Maidan Revolution over the past months, and this week received 3 ministries in the new Ukrainian government. While the Slobodda leaders have refrained recently from making anti-Semitic statements, it is troubling that the Oshlechter Slobodda's chief ideologue was named vice prime minister. Sykes' speeches over the years have focused on promoting Ukrainian nationalism, which he says is exemplified by Stefan Bandera, a leader of the Ukrainian nationalist movement of the 30s and 40s. Bandera was at times aligned with the Nazis during World War II and was complicit in mass killings of Jews and polls by Ukrainian partisans. Dmitry Yarshov, leader of Right Sector, met with Israel's ambassador to Ukraine, Ruvnev Denel, and told him that their movement rejects anti-Semitism and xenophobia and will not tolerate it. Ukrainian Jewish journalist Eleonora Grossman interviewed Sergei Menchikov, the leader of Splitna Spava, and told him that Ukrainian Jews were worried about the nationalistic Menshikenkos responded that Jews will not have any problems and shouldn't worry. He went on to say, on the Maiden there were Jews with us who served in the Israeli Defense Force. We've got along excellently and fought shoulder to shoulder. Will Svobodla accept Jews as full-fledged Ukrainians and follow the welcomed assurances of the armed nationalists, or will the promise of Right Sector and Splina Sparva be overtaken by the ethnic nationalism of Svoboda? That's from Abraham H. Foxman. In Ukraine, new government must assure Jewish community. That's from the Huffington Post from February 28th, 2014. The Anti-Defamation League doesn't address the fact that former Israeli soldiers fought alongside with known neo-Nazi militants who now claim to reject anti-Semitism. This sends the paradoxical message that neo-Nazism is somewhat acceptable. It is worth noting that the U.S. media, as well as the Anti-Defamation League, refrain from using the term neo-Nazi, neo-fascist, and extremist, and instead of condemning the abnormal alliance, the Anti-Defamation League sees a glimmer of hope in the promise of Right Sector and Splina Sparva groups, which the Israeli media itself qualified as fascist and neo-Nazi. Along with similar fascist and neo-Nazi groups such as Splina Sparva, which is Common Cause, I suppose, translated, and Afghanistan, a coalition of veterans from the Soviet War in Afghanistan. Parva sector has played a key role in both seizing government buildings and providing security for the sprawling protest camps against riot police. This is according to Ari Shofer, Ukrainian neo-Nazi militia leader, threatened civil war. That is from the Aksut Shiva from February 5th, 2014. Israelis Heartsa also reported that members of Svoboda and Praver sector were flying flags with neo-Nazi symbols and were distributing freshly translated editions of Mein Kampf and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in Independence Square. This is according to Anshel Pfeiffer, The New Dilemma for Jews in Ukraine, published on February 26, 2014. The Anti-Defamation League should not only firmly condemn the presence of all the fascist and neo-Nazi groups in the post-coup Ukrainian government, but also denounced the countries which support them morally and or financially, like the United States, Canada, and members of the European Union. In sharp contrast with today, Hillary Clinton was heavily criticized by Jewish groups in 2012 for indirectly legitimizing the Ukrainian opposition party that entered into a parliamentary alliance with a neo-Nazi party. The Anti-Defamation League has criticized the Ukrainian opposition party of Yulia Tymoshenko for having signed a parliamentary alliance that gave legitimacy to a far-right extremist party well known for its anti-Semitic views. The Anti-Defamation League National Director Abraham Foxman issued a statement in which he expressed alarm at the strong electoral support for the neo-Nazi Sloboda Freedom Party of Ukraine at last Sunday's parliamentary elections. Anti-Semitic rhetoric has been a mainstay of Sloboda's leaders and campaign slogans, Foxman said. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has come under fire from Jewish groups for having penned an op-ed published in the New York Times last week praising Tymoshenko's leader of the opposition Fatherland Party. Israel Foreign Secretary Igor Lieberman also denounced the agreement leading to the deaths of millions of Jews on Ukrainian soil during the Holocaust. This is according to Rachel Hirschfeld. Clinton indirectly legitimizing Ukrainian neo-Nazi party. That's from the Unshiva from June 12th, and that's from 2012. Today, former Israeli soldiers are fighting with Sloboda allies. with Sloboda allies. The Anti-Defamation League is not alarmed, and Agbid Lieberman has not condemned this unholy alliance. The Anti-Defamation League's Abraham Foxworth now hopes Prime Minister Yashenyuk will set an admirable example by ensuring anti-Semitism is not tolerated. Prime Minister Arseniy Yashenkov, together with UDAR leader Vitaly Klitschko, brought Sloboda into the opposition coalition in 2012. Now having brought Sloboda into the government, it is up to Prime Minister Yashenyuk to assure that anti-Semitism is not tolerated and that democratic norms are adhered to. By sending that message to the people of Ukraine now, the Prime Minister will reassure the Jewish community and set an admirable example. This is from an op-ed piece written by Mr. Foxman, the head of the Anti-Defamation League. What kind of example are we talking about? Alliance with a neo-Nazi group is okay as long as they are not anti-Semitic. The presence of former Israeli soldiers in the made in protest along with neo-Nazi militia, and the attitude of the Anti-Defamation League and Israeli officials in this matter raise questions about what the Zionist lobby and Israel might possibly gain from the coup, which put in power, among others, Igor Kolomoisky, a Ukrainian Israeli who was appointed governor of the Dnipropetrovsk, Ukrainian's vital business and political center. The newly appointed Dnipropetrovsk governor is Igor Kolomoisky, is Ukrainian's third wealthiest man and his estimated fortune of about 2.4 billion. He co-owns the informal commercial group Pivotal, which includes Ukraine's largest bank, Private Bank, which Kolomoisky heads, as well as assets in the oil, the Faro Alley, and food industry, agriculture, and transport. A former ally of Yulia Tymoshenko, Kolomoisky reportedly had a falling out with her and refused to finance her election campaign in 2010, which the ex-prime minister subsequently lost to Yanukovych. Kolomoisky has reported to be a principal sponsor of the UDAR party, which is one of the three fueling the street campaign to oust Yanukovych. Kolomoisky has a dual Ukrainian-Israeli citizenship and controls his business empire from Switzerland. This is according to Rule by Oligarchs. Kiev appoints billionaire to govern East. This is from the Russian Times from March 3rd, 2014. Kolomoisky also owns the Jewish interest news channel Jewish News One and heads the European Council of Jewish Communities, which describes itself as the pan-European umbrella body for Jewish communities and organizations across the continent, representing Jewish community life across West, Central, and Eastern Europe, covering around 40 countries. There is hardly any mention of the presence of neo-Nazi personalities in the new government on Jewish News One. It is also interesting to note that in a country struggling with an important national debt, Mr. Kolomoisky's private bank was the Ukrainian champion of offshoring in 2012. Economic Profit reported in July of 2012. Ukraine, which is struggling from poverty of the majority of its population, is able to make banking transfers to Cyprus and British Virgin Islands of billions of US dollars in a 2-month period. The question is, who does those transfers and what are the destinations? The first place is taken. The first place is taken by the biggest Ukrainian bank, Pivot Bank, the result of the entity which is owned by Ihor Kolomoisky and Hindati Holubov is almost fantastic. For the first 2 months of 2012, the Pivot Bank has transferred to the offshores $3,863 million US. Treasure Island Economic Providence, July 13th, 2012. After calling for a tax on Russia, the right sector leader Dmitry Yarhoff, seen by the Anti-Defamation League as reasserting, as reassuring, is now on an international wanted list for inciting terrorism. The Russian Times reported on March 5th, 2013. Early on Sunday, Yaris called Russia's most wanted terrorist, Duku Umarov, to act against Russia in an address posted on the right sector's page in the Ukrainian, Vokatate social network. The statement said that the many Ukrainians with arms in their hands supported Chechenian militants in their fight against Russia, and it is time to support Ukraine now. The message signed the leader of the right sector, Dmitry Yarshov, called on Umarov to activate his fight and take a unique opportunity to win over Russia. And this is from Ukraine. Russia puts Ukraine, far-right leader, international wanted list, calls for terrorism. This is from March 5th, 2013. Will the Anti-Defamation League review its position and condemn the neo-Nazi fascist and extremist groups as well as their supporters? That becomes a question, and that's the end of the article. And that was our article was written by Julia Lebescu. The situation in Ukraine is obviously very, very complicated. A lot of it has to do with the natural gas pipelines that flow through Ukraine. Ukraine gets about 60% of its natural gas from Russia, and if that connection was broken, then that would open up the opportunity for the United States, which is actually burning off natural gas because they have so much of it, to enter the equation as long as they could provide the infrastructure to get the natural gas from within the continental United States to the Ukraine. There are other factors involved as well. You always want to have the threat of war to keep the defense budget flowing. So, I mean, it's having an ideal time as Defense Secretary Hagel announced drastic cuts in not only the defense budget but in the size of the military. So, a lot of these things happen for a reason, and as you can see that if you haven't read in the earlier pieces that the United States, as has also been stated in this article, is that it wasn't really stated, but it was kind of inferred that U.S. dollars are flowing into the Ukraine to support a lot of these groups, the groups that ended up taking power from the democratically elected leader, Mr. Yanukovych. So it's a very interesting situation, and keep track of what's going on with us on eexclusives.com. Marc Hayes signing out.